All right, everybody. I'm gonna start recording here. I'm gonna wait 2 more minutes to get started, just for folks to drift on in. And I have emails that I might be people asking about. But then we'll get started. In the meantime, I'll share my screen since nobody needs to look at my ugly mug this whole time. Here is our handout that we'll be going over today. I'll be talking about apps in a second after Steph talks about um, your summer college plan, but I'll also give you guys an introduction. Does it work? It's a little loud. That's okay. Just you and me here. I don't think they can hear. There's supposed to be quite a few people coming in person, but you know how people like to be there in the summer. They like to register for things and then not come. No, that's all right. A lot of people are on Zoom, and I know some people are out of town and are watching the video on delay. Let me print you out a rest of this handout here. I'll have that for you in just a second. Hold on, guys. All right, guys. Sorry about that. Let me get started here. Thank you guys all for joining us for the app and essay workshop, where we're going to discuss you guys' college plans for your apps and what you should be doing this summer. What is most urgent, what is less urgent, the point of all this, and then I'll spend a good chunk at the end, kind of hopefully giving you guys a good push about the essays and what you should be writing about to help you stand out amongst the sea of 4.4 GPA folks in a world where everybody is a statistic. Guys, I'm Paul Jury from PJ Test Prep. My last name is just like in the court. Feel free to make fun of it if you like. Some suggestions include injury, forgery, grand jury, perjury, or if I ever went to England and got knighted, I'd be surgery. Sorry to Steph, who has had to hear that joke 7 or 8 times this past spring. I will be introducing in a minute Steph Burns, who's going to run the opening part of this. But in the meantime, guys, just to let you know kind of the way today's session is going to work, we are going to speak a little bit about the overall picture of college admissions. We're going to talk a little bit about where you should be at with your college lists and kind of discussing overall the more or less you can distill this down to like the 4 stages of figuring out where the heck you're going to apply your college list, figuring out what your package is going to look like in terms of how you're going to collect your teacher recommendations, put together your scores, your grades, your essays, and all of that. Third is the actual filling out of the application. And then, of course, the 4th step, if you haven't done this already before you fill out the app, is those essays, which is critical. Steph is going to handle most of the first 3 of those. And so I'm going to turn it over to her for the first part of this presentation. She's going to take you through the first page of this handout that we've got here. And then I'm going to take over in the last step. I've been coaching, not that she doesn't know about college essays as well, but I've been coaching and teaching essay classes for over a decade now. And I'm going to share with you guys some of the things that this guy and the other people who are reading your essays want. And then we'll send you guys off with some ideas for where to go from here. In the meantime, guys, I want to start by introducing Stephanie Burns, who is a longtime college admissions counselor and guide. She, until very recently, was the most senior guidance counselor at El Segundo High. We are congratulating her on her recent retirement, but she is still very much at the top of her game in helping kids get into college. So she's going to tell you what she's learned in all of her years of experience of getting kids into college everywhere about what you guys need to be doing. You guys can see her there. When she starts talking, she'll blow up more, but you guys can see my screen, which is what we're going to be talking about. So let me shut up and turn things over. Steph, thanks for being here with us tonight. Tell us your wisdom.
Thanks, Paul. Well, wisdom is good. I hopefully it will be very enlightening for you guys. The idea is I'm going to give you a lot of information. I want you to have be armed with lots of options and ideas and ways to organize yourself. And so I'm going to try to make that as entertaining as possible, but some of this information is just a lot of information. But I want to make sure that you have it because I want to make sure that you know where you're going. So in the way of kind of introducing this process, you are putting together your college application process. And being organized or getting organized is one of the fastest, easiest ways to start the process. I am not inherently organized, but it is a learned skill. And we can actually help you with that process when we start looking at the spreadsheet that I'm going to go through with you guys. So at the beginning here, this little pie chart here lets you know what colleges are looking for. It's kind of an overall view. So first you can see there that about 60%, give or take, is going to be your college, your high school GPA. Now, strength of schedule. I'm not 100% sure you all know that saying or what that phrase means. That means the courses that you've chosen to take over the time that you've been in high school. So did you take an honors course? Did you take an AP course or more, one or more? Did you take anything that's advancing you? That's strength of schedule, something that you're interested in if you're in a particular field, like an engineering area or a biomedical area or a business area that your school offers. Those are all places that speak to your strength of schedule. So you're combining what you've done with how well you've done it. And when you do those 2 things, that's about 60% of what colleges are looking for. So that gives you an idea of kind of your profile. That's the beginning of your profile. Then there's the other pieces there that you can see on the pie. That ACT, SAT fluctuates a little bit. You can see that it says 10% there, but depending on the school, it can be a little bit bigger. And if the school doesn't take SAT or ACT scores, then it would be down to 0. So it's a big variable. Here's my personal view. And I think the best option for SAT, ACT is now with more schools coming back online and requiring the SAT and ACT in private and out-of-state areas. I would rather all students take it and be qualified and confident in those scores rather than say, well, I'm not going to apply to school that is going to require those. And then at the last minute look and go, oh, I wanted that school and now I can't apply because I don't have the score. So I'm a better safe than sorry kind of person. So I would always tell students, please go in, please make sure you take those exams. And my other thing about that is don't go in cold. Make sure that you've done some preparation. Excuse me. I want to make sure that students don't just put any old score out there. You want to put your best foot forward first whenever possible. Next, you'll see, excuse me, personal statements. Personal statements are in most of your college applications. There's few that do not have any. That would be like the Cal State system does not have a personal statement or an essay. Some of the other state universities like Oregon State have optional. Whenever you see optional, it means just do it. So please take a look at those, and you're going to see that as I explain to you how you're going to find that information out for each of your applications. And then extracurriculars. I think students underestimate how much life experience you already have, how much you already know about what you can do, who you are, where you might go, and what you might want to do with your life. Some of you go, I have no idea what I want to do. That's okay. That's a perfectly great answer. That's information. All information is good information at this point. So those extracurriculars have to do with, have you been involved in any clubs or organizations? Have you been involved with any faith-based organizations? Have you been involved in any summer camps? Have you mowed lawns for someone? Have you been a dog walker? What have you done in your life experience outside of the classroom that speaks to who you are as a person? Now, if you're thinking, I haven't done very much, and it looks like it's like 20%, maybe a little more depending on the school, is that bad? No, there's no good or bad. It is what it is, and this is where we are. And if you're a rising senior, you have what you have, and you have this summer right now that we're in, and the opportunity for the fall to do some more things. What I would caution is if you do not have a lot on your resume, please do not go out for the fall and sign up for 5, 10, whatever, 15 organizations or clubs on your campus, because what that's going to signal to the admissions officers is, oh, I didn't think about doing this before, and now 2 months before I'm supposed to do my college application, I've decided to sign up for all these groups. That's not going to help you. Think about things that you're interested in. Think about things that are part of your life experience. If you are a surfer and you like to do beach cleanup, then you would start engaging in those things. Even if you haven't done them for a long time, it ties to who you are and what you're about. And so that would be something to add that wouldn't look like you're just trying to pad your resume. So being strategic about what you add for your extracurriculars is important. Paul, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and scroll up a little bit there. Thank you. So in getting organized, one of the things that I like to do is ask students to please put together a spreadsheet for themselves. This is a template. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. I just wanted to put all these things in here so that you know what needs to be in your spreadsheet. I like students to start with, what schools do I think I want to apply to? You have up to 3,000 or more opportunities for your schools if you choose the North American continent, Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. And you can add a few more if you want to entertain things in Europe or the UK. So 3,000 is kind of a lot. We're looking to go with 10 to 12, ultimately. That's where we like to land. And so how you research those and what you find is important. So there's some ways to do that. And there's some ways to do that that's effective and efficient for you. So take a look at some schools that you think you might want to go to, and start with, if your school has Naviance, you can use Naviance, and they have something called Supermatch. And you can take some career interest inventories and see what you might like. There's also niche. Now, I'm going to caution right now about browsers. Browsers, just like Google, have sponsorships. And so things that run to the top tend to be things that are sponsored. I always encourage students, please go to the second and third pages. I could probably show by a raise of hands how many people never go past the second or third page, or even get to the second or third page of most things when you're Googling stuff or when you're looking things up. When you do go on Niche, NICHE is the name of that browser, it tends to be a little less sponsored, and it takes in more factors when they do rankings. It's not the rankings that I'm really actually interested in that you look at. It's getting an idea of a bunch of schools when you put in your parameters. I want to live on a coast. I want to live in the middle of the country. I want to live in the north. I want to live in the south. I don't want snow. Whatever your deal is, you can put those things in, whether it's Naviance or Niche, and then, or both, and then you can kind of get a sense of some schools that you can look into. Now, what are you looking for when you're looking for a campus? How do you possibly even begin to narrow that down? Well, there's some kind of neat, as Paul would say, tricks of the trade. So I want to share those with you. So if you're looking at schools and you know what you want to do, let's say you have an idea of what you want to major in or what you want your career to be down the road, okay? Work backwards. That's really the biggest key that people forget about when they're doing these things. If you work backwards, you'll actually have a better idea of where you might want to go to school, or where a school is that you might want to attend. Here's how. If you know you want to go to med school, if you know you want to go to law school, if you know that you're going to get you want a certain job in, let's say engineering is very popular these days, and you want to go straight into a job from engineering. You can look at schools and find out where they get their students. So say you want to go to NYU med school, and that's a pretty popular one. It's number one right now because they have a debt-free system right now. So they're very exciting to people because you graduate with your degree and you don't have to pay any medical school bills. So let's say you say, okay, I want to go to NYU. I go to the NYU site and find out where did they get their students? Where did they get their pool of applicants? If you find out the schools that fed to that school, then that could be schools that you would research and look at for your interest. If you're looking at engineering, computer science, another one, Cal Poly gets a little undersold, is in environmental sciences and earth sciences because they're big on wines and wine business. They send a lot of their students to become employees in the Napa Valley and areas like that. So let's say you want to do one of those things. You could look up Cal Poly SLO and find that it is a Cal State University at a Cal State University price, which it gets big props for being the best bang for its buck. And it's a top 10 ranked school in many, many degrees. So the reason I say that as you start to look is because people get locked into name brands. If I asked you guys to, do we have a chat in there, Paul?
Yeah, go to chat.
If you guys could toss into the chat one or two schools that you could think of that most people would know about, could you throw those out there? If you don't want to, you don't have to. But I'm thinking that I'm gonna come up with some schools that would be pretty commonplace, right? So, yep, John Hopkins. Yep, that one's in there. UCLA. Oh, we get UCLA. Oh, yes, UCLA pops up plenty of times. Okay. UCLA is one of my best examples. Oh, I got the UCs. Let's just cover all the UCs. Right. Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all those places, they're name brands. That's what I call a name brand. USC, whichever USC, East Coast, West Coast. So these are great schools. And when I ask students, what's the best school? It's a trick question because there isn't a best school. The best school is the school that works for you. And the way that you'll know that is by starting to look at what programs does it offer? What are you interested in? What do you want from your college experience? These are the questions that you want to ask yourself as you start to formulate your college choices. Then you can kind of put them in a ranking order for yourself. Some students get very fancy with the spreadsheet. It's color coded. It's very neat. Other people have stickies all over their room and that's their spreadsheet. Whatever works for you or something in between would be fantastic. So once you go, okay, I think I have kind of a list figured out. Then we look at personal preferences. Okay, what do you think about this? Does it have your major? One of Paul, I hear Paul's jokes, which by the way, I still laugh at your jokes, Paul, even if I hear them often. The other thing too is that Paul gets to hear some of my same examples over and over. And one of his favorites happens to be UC Santa Barbara. So when we're looking at the UCs and you say, yes, I really want to go to UC Santa Barbara. And yes, I really want to major in business. And then we get to UC Santa Barbara and look up and students will go, I can't find my major. That's because it doesn't have a specific business major as an undergraduate. So there's things that you need to learn about when you're looking at majors. I do want to go into business, but let's say I'm really tied to Santa Barbara. That's okay. There are other majors that you can choose that are related that will get you where you want to go. So it could be economics, it could be international relations. So those are kind of probing questions about what do you want to do with this degree, if you even know. Undeclared is a perfectly acceptable answer. You can say, I have no idea what I'm doing. That is okay. You can build a perfectly great college application package with I don't know. Okay, as long as you're following some of these other processes. So then you look and you say, okay, well, I have all these schools and some of them are name brands. So I'm like, maybe there's UCLA on there or something. And maybe I'm a strong student. Maybe I have a 4.0 GPA or maybe higher than a 4.0 or 3.8, 3.9. That's great. How do I know if it's a likely school, a target school, a competitive school, or a reach school? Well, one of the things that you need to remember is that there are some schools like UCLA, Princeton, Yale, Penn, UPenn. These are what I call lotto schools. You might as well try to win the lottery in finding out whether or not you're a solid match for that school. You can be absolutely in the pool of applicants, and I'm going to use my little visual aid as my little hands here for pool of applicants. You can be in the pool of applicants and still not necessarily be a target or likely student. And that depends on the major that you declare, and it depends on the type of school that we're applying to. So for example, if you want to do nursing, nursing is impacted everywhere. So you would say, okay, I want to get into nursing, but even if I'm a really strong candidate for that school, it's got a 3.6, 3.7 GPA, like Long Beach State, for example, has a 3.6 to 3.8 GPA. And I have a 3.8, 3.9, 4.2 GPA. So I'm above their pool of applicants. So I've definitely hit that third and I'm above it. That would usually make me a likely candidate for that school. It'd be likely that I'm going to get in. However, with nursing, it makes it more of a target or a competitive category because the target and competitive category has also to do with how impacted those majors are. So depending on what you want to do, that's going to have a factor there. So you're going to look up on, there's one of the things that students kind of don't always know to do, and that is to go to your website, pick a college, any of the ones you guys suggested already in the chat, or maybe a different one that you're thinking about, and look up their freshman profile. And when you look up their freshman profile, you are looking for their average GPA. You're looking for how many students they accepted, not the admissions rate. I'm gonna give you a whole thing on how many students. Can you give me a thumbs up out there if you've ever looked at an admissions statistic for any college? Any parent or student out there ever done that? Oh, we got one. Okay, we got somebody that's gonna, a little plant over there helping me out. All right. Okay. If you have, that's okay. Just know that it's the most misleading statistic that you can use to determine what schools you should be applying to. So the admissions rate is going to be all over the map, and there's a lot. I could give you a whole new seminar on why that's a bad statistic. Instead, I'm going to tell you what statistics to look for. So please look for your employment rate, the graduation rate. Are there students getting out of school in 4 to 6 years? Are those students going on to grad school? Are those students being employed by people in the major that they have been taking during their college career? So those are the statistics that will tell you how strong a school it is. So people say, for example, you got to have a name brand. And I used Long Beach State a minute ago. It's not always considered a name brand unless you're in the, South Bay area of Los Angeles. But Long Beach has one of the strongest engineering programs, and it also has one of the strongest nursing programs in the state and even out of state. Okay, so what you can do for the different like target, competitive, and reach, make sure that you have a diversified portfolio. Okay, so you want at least 2 targets, 2 likelies, couple reaches, and you're good to go. Make sense? Hope so. All right, if it doesn't, we can always ask questions in the chat or whatever you need, and Paul can field those. All right, declare your major, undeclared. Again, you can be undeclared. That's totally okay. Now you have platforms, like where are you going to apply? Well, different schools have different platforms. So you have a common app, a UC app, an independent, a state. All of those things are going to be located on the website for that school. It's going to tell you how to apply, okay? So make sure that you find the platform that you need, because you're going to need to fill that platform out completely. Okay. It's a lot of information. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm hitting you with a fire hose worth of information, but I want you to know that this is really not scary. It doesn't have to be daunting. It is absolutely doable. It's just everything you need to learn. You need to know you learned in kindergarten. That's a book actually that was out there a while back. And it means look both ways when you cross the street, have a buddy, know what you're doing, read. They're really looking for you to read the directions. So if you can read the directions, you're going to be okay. All right. Let's talk for just a minute, and Paul can interrupt me and let me know if he needs me to move and do something different. But let's talk for just a minute on how you apply: early action, early decision, regular decision, 1, 2, any of those things, because there's different ways and different deadlines. So we want to make sure that you have the right deadline and the right program for you. Okay. So early action means, hey, I'm going to apply to your school early, and you're going to tell me early if I got in. And that is not binding. You can go anywhere you want. Early decision is binding. It's like, hi, I'm signing up for the military. Usually that's athletes, and that's folks that have had legacies at schools, and no matter what happens, they want to go to that school. And then you also have regular decision and rolling decision, and those are a little different. But if you turn in your applications, and my rule is Thanksgiving, you do not sit down, you do not have turkey, you do not have tofu, you do not have anything unless your applications are finished. Okay, so if you make that your deadline, no matter what your deadline is on here, you're going to be fine. If it's early action, it might be a little earlier, November 1st. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to be on your things. Scores. We talked about SATs a minute ago. It's some schools are going to be test optional. That's another place too that you can also talk to Paul when it comes to, do I submit a score or do I not submit a score? There's some strategy involved there. You want to make sure that, there's a lot of skewed data now because there's less people taking some tests for some schools, or if it's test optional, do I submit it? Those are usually really high scores now. It used to be an average, and I can tell you anything, and Paul, chime in on this one, 1250 to 1300 or so competitive score. Yeah.
Yeah. My rule of thumb is that if if you get 1,300 or north of there, then like most likely you're going to send that almost anywhere, like even to Harvard, because yes, I know that Harvard's average acceptance is higher than that, but 1,300 is a top, 5 to 10 percentile score, and Harvard accepts about 5 to 10% of the applicants. Obviously, the pool is a targeted one, but you are, if you have a 4.1, so do 100,000 other people. Not as many people have 1,300s, and so if your score is in that range, I would generally always consider submitting it. Certainly submitting it to schools that aren't Harvard. And if you're in the like 1,000 to 1,200 range. I mean, 1,100, 1,200 is, again, well above average, top quartile, or well, pushing towards top quartile. Then it depends a little bit more on the school and on the GPA. If you're lower than average, unless your GPA is in real trouble, then you're probably not submitting.
Exactly. And my rule of thumb too is about a 31 on the ACT. That's solid. You're there. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of merit scholarships that go with a 31 too, by the way. 31 is great. 31 is really kind of that right over the edge. A lot of schools have a lot of things for that.
Yeah, and I would even push that further to say that depending on the situation, even a 26 or 27 is higher than 75% of people. So, again, at MIT, a 27 is not great, but for a vast majority of colleges, a 27 is going to help a vast majority of GPAs. So don't think that, oh, well, I shouldn't submit it unless I have a 31. No, if you have a 31, you definitely should submit it. And below that, you may very well still. It just depends a little more.
Excellent. Thank you. So that gives you an idea of how those scores go. And some schools are not going to accept them at all. For example, in California, the California State University and the UCs are not using them right now. But like I said before, you never know where you might want to apply or something pops up. And I just wouldn't want any student to go, oh, I didn't take it. That's just not a good plan. So then on the last part where it says notes, this is where some of your prime real estate is. That's what I call it. I call it prime real estate, beachfront property. This is good stuff. Okay. So you have your activities, you have your clubs, organizations, leadership skills, and where letters of recommendation come in, and where some of your other options for filling in those pieces of the application that might be unique to the Common App or might be unique to that school's web app. Now, when it says independent application, that means that if you're at Oregon State, for example, you can do a Common App or you can go Ducks. Okay. So if you go on the Duck application, you can be a Duck and you do a Duck account. And I always like, if you can, to do a school's application on their website, because you get a little more, it gets a little more detailed and it's very specific to them. And when Paul talks in a few minutes about the essays, you can be more specific. When you do the Common Application essay, you're talking to all the schools that are on the Common Application. You're not going to specify a campus. But if you do it on their application, then you can actually be a little more specific to that school. So that's one of the things you want to put in there too. So when you do we have any performing art people out there or anybody that's doing anything kind of different or special? I don't know. I can't tell when I look.
We're all doing interesting, special things, but
they
who's
are,
doing
but
it
I
in the
mean, interesting
portfolio
special that
realm?
requires additional application stuff.
Right.
So if you're doing something special like a portfolio for art or something like that, you're going to need to do additional pieces and they'll have additional deadlines. So that's what I mean by that kind of special. And there always is students, whenever I work with them, there's always someone that's going to be, there's going to always be someone that is the award for the most written personal statements and essays that they had to do, and the person for the least amount that they had to do. And I'm always happy for both of them, although I feel a little bit for the person who's writing a whole lot of stuff. But Paul's going to give you some ways to make that also feel a lot more manageable too. So when you're doing that, please look at your activities. Please look at what they're asking for. If your school has an ambiance, there's a resume builder in there. And you really should use that resume builder, or if your school asks for a brag sheet, you want to complete it carefully and thoroughly, because that's what your teachers and your recommenders are going to use and your counselor are going to use to recommend you if letters of recommendation are required. If they're required, please submit them. The school will tell you exactly how many they will take, and they will tell you if they're not going to take any. Do not submit things that they don't want, and do not submit more than they ask for. The deal is they're looking to see if you can follow directions. So it's pretty simple that way. So more is not always better. It's how deep do you go? How much are you a leader? How is that working together for you? Does that make sense? Okay. And then Paul, you want to scroll it up? I can look and see what
Yeah,
else I,
can I ask before we leave this chart, can
yes,
I add a couple
yes,
thoughts and questions for you?
yes.
One thing that is going to dovetail into what I'll talk about in a minute with the essays is, in case it wasn't clear already, guys, when Steph's talking about the number of written responses required, if you're applying to, Arizona or something like, actually Arizona may not even have an S. Arizona has
Yeah,
an S,
they
Arizona
do.
State does not. Sorry,
It's
sometimes
optional, and the answer is yes.
yes. Many schools, probably the majority of schools, will just have you write that one main Common App essay. It's a 650 word essay. That's all you got to do for a ton of schools. There are schools that have, on top of that, other what we call supplements or other written responses. If you're applying to Stanford, they're going to need like your main Common App essay and then also 9 other things. Now, these are shorter, so they're not 9 650 word essays, but you have to write a couple 200, 300 word essays and then some short answer responses. And if you are debating whether you should even apply to Stanford, you don't really know if you want to get in there, go there, even if you did get in. It's your 8th school on the list. Possibly that could be a reason to focus your time on something else if you're going to have to do 9, supplements. Most schools don't have that many. The most common thing is like, well, besides just the straight up written response, but if you're applying to like Colorado Boulder or something like that, an essay main one and then like one supplement or sometimes 2, like LMU sometimes wants 2. Those are the additional things. The UCs have a whole entire different system. They just want 4 shorter essays. They don't want the longer one. I will address that in a minute, but that's what we mean when we're talking about written responses. And sometimes that can affect your decisions. If you're like, I don't want to write for 9 hours for a school I don't really want to even apply to. You can, though, by the way, repurpose a lot of your supplements from one school to the other, so you don't necessarily have to write duplicate things.
It's true.
Um,
I have in my own home, my daughter bailed on a couple of schools and went, yeah, I don't want it that much.
yeah,
I just don't want to know.
yeah,
Because it is, you do get tired after a while. And a lot of them will be, my favorite is, it's one of the Colorado schools. And I want to say they're the Bluffs. Like, I'm trying to remember which school it is. It was like, every bluff is unique. How are you a bluff? And almost all the schools have a why fill in the blank.
yeah.
Why USC? Why, LMU, when you talked about that one, very often does a lot of social justice. The Jesuits are big on their social justice. So, and looking for leadership skills or looking for ways that you're going to put in your leadership skills. And that's why your life experience matters. That's why building that resume, if you have the resume built, if you have your brag sheet completed, if you have an idea of your colleges and you have them ranked down and you've decided, you've determined by looking at your transcript and your strength of schedule and your activities, how the likely target competitive reach, you have all those pieces in place. This becomes very methodical and doable and somewhat strategic. But really, you can, once you have those things together, you go, oh, I can do this. It's really just pulling all of that information together at the beginning that looks big, but it's not that big. It's time consuming, but it's not big. It's absolutely, you know how to do this. You've known, if you went to TK or kindergarten, you've had 13 years behind you to tell you exactly how to do this. Okay.
Steph, can I ask 2 other questions from this chart before we leave it? The first is the difference between early decision 1 and 2. Sometimes people ask that, and then I'll ask a question after that about the majors thing.
Great. So early decision and early action, there's early decision 1 and 2, there's early action 1 and 2. I didn't list everything here because they've gotten, depending on the school, it's this long now.
Too many options, yeah.
Yeah, it's too many. It's kind of ridiculous, really. So I really appreciate schools that don't do that. Early decision 1 and 2 is their option to take what I like to say the first class seats. So if you have a school that has a pool of applicants, if you are in the top third or the top 25% of that school's applicant pool, and it comes out to be a target or a likely school for you, even a little bit competitive, then yes, not necessarily your decision, but early action is a good idea. And if it's a school that you want to go to no matter what, and you're willing to sacrifice everybody else, I will tell you one little quick story on that. I always have a sob story. One of our students went early decision to, it was either Northwestern or Northeastern. I can't remember which one now. but one of the northwestern eastern. And we always kind of used to collaborate with each other. And so the counselor for that student wasn't my student, came in and said, Mrs. Burns, I want a second opinion. This is always a good idea to get a second opinion, because just like a doctor or anything else, get another opinion. So she comes in and says, I've told Susie here, for lack of name, I've told Susie here not to apply early decision, but to go with regular, admission and see what happens. And she said, nope, I'm going to go early decision. And we explained that it was binding. The other schools that she applied to included many high profile schools: Princeton, Stanford, UCLA, UC San Diego. Some really great schools in her mix. And she always had told me that her dream school, and I'm going to give away the punchline here, her dream school was Stanford, but she knew she wouldn't get in. So she decided to go early decision to Northwestern, we'll just say, for example. And she did get in. She got in on early decision. Then she also got into Stanford, and she could not take it. And she was crushed. And so the flood of tears came in, and we went like this, because she still would have gotten in on regular decision to Northwestern or Northeastern, whichever one she wanted. And she had Stanford. So, and then the thing to keep in mind too is early action sometimes has a restriction, and Stanford is one of those schools, which is why I bring it up, that you can do early action, but only to one school, because they don't want you to do early action to a whole bunch of schools. So that early action, Stanford is early action restrictive. So I really look long and hard before I do that one. A lot of times regular decision is just fine. They will take no more than 15 to 20% on the high end, 25% on a very high end from their early admittances. The rest of their population, over half of the people they're going to admit, is going to be in that second wave. So you're not missing out on a ton by not going early, okay, especially if it's early decision. So early decision 1 and 2 is so that they can kind of fill the first 10 to 20% of their seats and they're always going to pick who they believe are going to be the top of their pool, the top of their applicant pool for that year. So if you're not feeling like you're going to be at the top of that applicant pool for that year, going early action or early decision doesn't really help you, because they're either going to defer you or reject you off right out of hand by being in that pool already. And we go in regular decision, you're in the next group of applicants, and that's where they take the majority of their students.
Is early decision 1 versus 2 two waves of that?
Yes.
Okay, an earlier
Usually it's
round and then a
October.
second
Yeah,
round.
the earliest date is usually October 15th. The most common date is November 1st, and then the next date is November 15th.
Okay. So short answer, guys, unless you know for sure you really want to go to a school and you would never go anywhere else if you get in, probably don't do early decision. It can be a long shot helper, but as she said, unless you think you're a pretty strong candidate, then they may just defer you anyway, so it doesn't help. Early action is a good middle. Last question, and I get this one all the time, and I have my answer for it, but I want to hear yours. We talk a lot about impacted majors, engineering or computer science or nursing. Okay, but what if I really do want to be a nurse? Should I put that down for my school? Or because it might decrease the chances that I get in, should I instead go just regular old undecided for this school if I think I have a chance, even though I would like to try to switch into the nursing program?
Nursing in particular is a tough one on that one, because many nursing programs, now what you can do is I would look for schools that have a pre-nursing major, because then you can get in and then be admitted into the nursing program, and that's not as impacted. If it's a straight BSN with a nursing major, you pretty much have to bite the bullet and apply in nursing, because they don't take transferring students. In fact, Cal Poly will tell you in their engineering, it's very rare, if ever, that you can get into their engineering program if you don't apply into their engineering program. However, that doesn't mean that's true for all schools. So that's a case by case with some of the schools. Like, for example, Cal Poly also has a pretty impacted communications program. It has an impacted teaching program. It has impacted environmental science program. But if you go in as another major that's not as impacted, or you go into something a little more, if I say innocuous, if you have really strong math scores or really strong physical science scores, you might go in physics, you might go in applied math. Then it's much easier to shift into a related major. So that's the same thing for USC, for example, in Marshall School of Business is very tough to get into. But USC is very double major and major switching friendly, with the exception of Viterbi Engineering, because a lot of their courses start right away in engineering. So if I wanted to go into the Marshall School of Business and I wasn't really sure I was going to get in there, I would be applying to Dornsife, and I would go in a more multidisciplinary entrepreneurship kind of major that's in a different school. And then I would start taking classes in Marshall and I'd switch over or I'd add that program. So there are ways to be strategic about it, but it is pretty much case by case, school by school. The hard one is computer science and engineering. Computer science is a little easier. You can also do math and some things like that. You can do some related things, and that will get you into a computer science major after. You don't have to apply directly into a computer science major to get in afterwards, after the fact.
So short answer is
So
case
it's
by
new,
case
it's very
basis.
nuanced.
Yeah,
It's
and if you have specific questions, maybe a good thing to direct towards Stephanie, your specific situation, and she can answer from the
yeah.
perspective of your actual schools. So,
It's pretty
okay,
personalized at that point.
yeah. All right, where should I go next?
Let's keep on going. We'll keep scrolling.
Okay, well that's it for our
So
two
we do we
pages
have
here.
those two there? Okay,
Yeah,
then we're great.
that's it.
Then I'm happy to hand it off to you.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. So guys, I'm going to dive into the essays here for about 20 minutes. If you have questions pertaining especially to the app stuff and you want to chat those, Stephanie can answer your questions while I'm doing this, since we're all multitaskers these days. But I do want to tell you guys a little bit about the essays. And I will truncate my usual storytelling hour a little bit for the sake of everybody's afternoon here. But I do hope to push you guys in the right direction. Part of the reason we do this presentation is because now is the time when a lot of people are like, oh no, I need to be starting my application essays, or, oh, I already started them, but now I'm really worried that they're not going to be strong, or I don't really know what they're looking for. What am I supposed to do? And so that's where I want to give you guys a good hard shove in the right direction here. I am going to tell you guys some stories here today. Before I do that, though, I'm going to try to hit a couple of just logistical clarifications, some of which I've hinted at already. But I'm going to jump down to the bottom of page 2 of our handout and talk about what I would suggest your overall logistical approach be towards writing these essays in terms of just how am I going to get them all done? It feels like I have so many schools and so many different essays. How am I going to actually execute these in a way where I'm not like at the last minute writing some that are bad and so forth. But also I don't want to write 50 different essays and spend 1,000,000 hours on this. The following is my recommendation for anybody who is applying to UC schools and also some Common App schools. In my experience, that covers about 90% of you. Because why would you not apply to at least one UC school? They're quite good and they're cheap. But also, you shouldn't only apply to UC schools these days because it's extremely hard to even get into the supposedly easy ones. So let's say you're applying to a couple of UCs, maybe a couple Cal States. By the way, you don't have to do essays for the Cal States. But you're also applying to LMU and maybe USC and Washington and, hell, Northwestern, where I went for no reason. The best way to do this, to execute all these essays with the least amount of effort for the best results, is as follows. Come up with about 10 ideas. Don't worry about any prompts yet. Just based on the stuff I talk about today, I want you guys to try to write down. Maybe you come up with a couple of them during my talking, and then maybe you go home and brainstorm using this essay application brainstorming sheet we've got here. Come up with 10 ideas. You aren't going to write 10 essays, but if you come up with 10 ideas, then the ones that you came up with that suck, you can not do those, and you can do the ones that suck less or are actually, God forbid, good. It's really hard to come up with a good idea on the first try, but if you come up with 10 ideas, it's also very hard to come up with 10 really sucky ideas. Inevitably, 1 or 2 of them are going to be slightly better. Ideally, 4 of them are at least halfway decent. If you come up with 4 decent ideas out of 10, you have accomplished this goal, because then we take the 4 of your favorite ideas. Then we look at the UC prompts. The UCs require 4 350-word max essays. What is a 350-word max essay? It's basically 3 paragraphs. It can be more or fewer paragraphs. There's no strict structure. It's not just one paragraph. You're not just answering the question in a stream of consciousness. You can still tell a little bit of a story with the beginning, middle, and an end, but it doesn't need to be such a flowery essay as maybe we would write for the Common App, although they don't necessarily like flowery ones either. That is only one style of doing this. But if you take your 4 favorite ideas, look at the UC prompts, decide where they might fit, usually you can get your 4 ideas to fit into those prompts, and you start to develop those. I know the UC deadlines are a little bit later. You don't have to do that until November, but if you start to develop those now, you'll have a head start on those. And here's the real reason for doing it. As you start to at least brainstorm, maybe outline, maybe even do a rough garbage draft of these UC essays, you'll find that maybe 2 of your essays they're okay, but you're not in love with them. Fine, whatever. No, and nobody writes 4 home run UC essays. They're not expecting that. But maybe 2 of them you actually kind of start to like. Okay, you know what? I like this one. I feel like this one stands out a little bit more than the others. It's the 1 and 2 best ideas out of my 10. Those ideas can grow into your Common App essay. Whether you just simply write a longer version of one of them for your Common App essay, or oftentimes you combine 2 of them into one essay, that can be a really interesting way to kind of come at the Common App essay from a slightly different approach that doesn't involve you having to come up with totally different ideas. Let the UCs flow into your Common App essay as a matter of elimination. Then, if you have a Common App longer essay done, and you also have 4 UC essays, 1 or 2 of which might overlap a little bit, that's still going to leave 1 or 2 UC essays that you kind of like, but you didn't use already for your Common App essay. Those can become your supplements. You can then repurpose those. Not always, sometimes the supplements are very specific, but you can often then use those as well. So you're not reinventing the wheel here. I've seen kids apply to 10 or 12 schools, each of which has supplements, and they've written as few as like 6 total essays. The 4 UCs, 1 longer one, and then maybe there's 1 supplement that's super specific, like why do you want to go to Duke? And so they got to do that one a little differently. But that keeps you from having to write a million different things, and it focuses your ideas into ones you actually. One other idea here, I'll come back to this combo idea, but that's a cool way of sometimes combining 2 things into an idea that wasn't so unique, but now it is because you combine 2 ideas. One other just a logistical topic before I get into our approaches here. Don't repeat what's already elsewhere on your application. Sometimes people have like a flagship achievement, like, oh, I'm the president of the student body, or I'm the captain of the volleyball team, or I'm an Eagle Scout, or whatever. They think that because that's a pretty impressive thing, like, yeah, being president of the student body is pretty impressive. You only have 1 of those for each school. Wow, that's really great. They think they have to write about that. You don't have to write about that. The school already knows that you're the captain of the volleyball team. They already know that you're the president of the student body because it's on your activities list. It's on your list of things that you've done. They know that. And if there's not really a story there, it's kind of more baller to like be the president of the student body and not write about it. That's just a side thing I do. No worries. You don't have to write about it unless there's a story. I'm not saying you can't. If there is a crazy story of some interesting technique you used to win the election, or you learned a lot about politics and democracy by becoming the president of the student body, then cool, there's a story. But it's fine to just have it be an item and you use the essay for what it's really for, which is giving them something they don't see elsewhere on your app. Okay, I'll come back to some of these other details here in a minute, but I want to take a step back and talk to you guys about kind of the whole philosophy behind these essays in the first place, which comes down to one of the first and most important rules of writing anything, whether you are writing a college application essay or a creative writing piece or a screenplay or whatever, a mash note to your crush. You always want to think about your audience. The way that you write a chemistry lab report is very different than you write a Shakespeare paper for your grammar Nazi of an English teacher. Is a very different way than you write a meme text to a friend. You need to think about who you're writing for. And for your college application essays, you are writing for this person. Well, demographically, it's slightly more statistically likely to be female and maybe a little bit younger. Although, I don't know, maybe this guy's actually only 28. He's just going gray because he read 15 Eagle Scout essays in a row. But you got to think about this person sitting in a stuffy office at LMU or, UC Berkeley or Northwestern or wherever. This person has read a lot of these essays. They've read thousands of these essays in all likelihood. And a lot of these kids are valedictorians. A lot of these kids have high SAT, ACT scores. Please don't write about, oh, my high SAT score and my great GPA are because I'm a hard worker. Besides being a smoke word, yeah, they already know that, and that's lame. And everybody in their pile is like that. They want to just read something from somebody different. They also get really bored by reading the same application essays over and over again. And by the way, I don't want to intimidate you here. Here's one thing to make you feel better. I've read, oh, I don't know, thousands, maybe 10,000 of these essays at this point. And these are people who really care. A lot of them are coming in to take my classes. Such a high percentage of essays are just garbage. Like so many of them that they read, like are kids that didn't even try. They just like sent them off at the last minute. Like 50% of them are just the fact that you're even here in the seminar, you're going to be better than a lot of these. However, we don't want to just be better than half of them. We want to be even higher. So putting some thought into this is helpful. But they do read a ton of these, and a lot of people write the same things over and over and over again. And so anything that's like interesting in any way can be another approach. A third approach is, as we'll get to in a minute, kind of the most businessy, cynical one of them. They do always want that kid who is just going to like crush it, who's just going to make big waves in the world. It doesn't have to even be an amazing essay, and doesn't have to be funny or like vocabulicious or anything. If they're like, damn, this kid did a lot of cool stuff. Wow, okay. That's good too. That's another approach that we'll talk about. This last thing isn't really even an approach. Obviously, it has to be a decent piece of writing. I don't mean it has to be Shakespeare or Hemingway. Not everybody is an amazing creative writer. Just please don't like misspell words or have the wrong mascot for the school in your essay. Like don't just send off the first draft, write it, and then have somebody look at it, please. Have your spell check at least, correct your errors in it and so forth. But these three underlying things, different, interesting, and making waves, relate to the three approaches that I always tell people when we're trying to figure out what they're supposed to write. Now, it may seem a little vague and amorphous, but I'm going to give you some examples to sort of back this up. And I hope this will spur some ideas for you guys about what you might write about. The first approach that you can take when you're trying to come up with ideas, or if you've already written one and you're trying to make sure it's good or not, is to ask yourself, what is something impressive about what I have done? What is something impressive about me? Any old kid can get good grades and graduate. They want to find the bigger fish who are going to go out there and start a company, start the next Facebook or something, even if it means they drop out. These people love it when somebody that they admitted goes off and becomes really rich and donates a whole bunch of money back to the school. And then the alumni donation fund goes up, and then they can hire another application reader. In a way, this is the most cynical approaches, because colleges are always looking for people who are going to increase their college's brand name. Colleges are just businesses. They always want people who are going to go and make them look good, and they can have them come back and give commencement speeches because they became famous. Now, what you can't do is say, I'm going to become famous. I'm going to go off and invent the next Facebook or start a charity or win an award or something like that, because it's really pompous to say that you're going to do something like that. We don't have any reason to believe that. Anybody can write about the future. And also, Facebook's not even cool anymore. So don't write about that. What you can do and what you should do is think about a time that you once did something. And here's the key with this: the time that you did something that maybe not everybody would have done, that maybe not everybody could have done, the time that you showed your strengths, the time that you dug deep and did something hard, the time that you even just went a little above and beyond on a project. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples, kind of in the middle. The extreme versions are like, oh, I really love computer science. And so when the pandemic broke out, I wrote a COVID tracking app that charted COVID cases in my neighborhood better than the one that the WHO was using. Okay. I actually read about a kid who did that. I read a newspaper article about him, and I was like, oh, this kid's probably going to get into a lot of colleges. He's probably going to be okay. It doesn't have to be that extreme. The other extreme could just be like, there was an English project and I went above and beyond. The teacher complimented me on doing a really good job on that project. It can be as mundane as that. I love it when there are things that are maybe a little just beyond regular school work, but they don't have to be award-winning things. One example I give was a student who was trying to figure out if he wanted to be a lawyer or not. His dad was a lawyer, but then again, his dad kind of seemed miserable half the time, so he wasn't sure. But he joined mock trial, when he was a freshman, not because he had some like noble explorations about social justice pursuits, but his dad said, hey, you really like to argue a lot, so why don't you do it as an extracurricular? Anyway, this kid joins, has a good experience, but he's still trying to figure out, I don't know, do I want to do law or maybe do I or not? And junior year comes around and his coach says, hey kid, are you interested in like being the captain of the team next year? And he goes, coach, I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure out if I want to do this at all. Like I'm still trying to figure out my career. Like, what is mock trial? We're talking about curing starvation in third world countries and stopping global warming. What does that have to do with actually being a lawyer? I'm not going to be in the UN. And so his coach says, hey, tell you what, I get it. I got a buddy who's always trying cases over at the Torrance courthouse. Why don't you go sit in on a day of actual real trials? You're complaining about mock trials. Well, go see a real trial and see if that helps anything. So this kid's like, sure, we don't have school on Friday. It's supposed to rain. I can't go surfing anyway. So sure, I'll go and watch trials. He sits in on a 7-hour day of trials over at the Torrance courthouse. And let me tell you, this is not like television. This is not like Law and Order, O.J. Simpson trial, the reality TV. This is like a guy fighting a parking ticket. And like a dude was trying to get 1 additional day per month of custody over his daughter. And the most dramatic case of the day was a girl had gotten in a fight at a bar and hit somebody with a bottle and might have to spend a week in jail. And his first reaction as he's watching all this is, my God, this is so boring. Like it's real life. It's like the lawyer dropped his notes and the bailiff spent 5 minutes helping them pick up, and they took a recess that went on too long because the judge got locked in the bathroom for a little bit. And like, it's just so mundane, but it's also real people's lives. I mean, a parking ticket, like who cares? But 1 day of custody over a kid might not seem like a big idea to you or to me, but it's probably a big deal to that dad, to that daughter. Going to jail for a week, I'm tough. I could do a week in the joint, but maybe that's going to be a life-changing experience for that girl. And so he goes back afterwards and says, all right, coach, I'll be the captain next year, but only if we can do a parking ticket trial next time. And so again, you get the sense of this kid like, they kind of did something that maybe not everybody would have done. Who goes and like sits in on a day of court trials? But that makes them seem like they understand law a little bit better. And whether they decide to law in it or to major in it or something peripheral, you sort of get that sense that they get this a little bit better because they did something. Another example I'll give, I won't tell the full story, but this kid went to a theater-heavy school where they had these 1-act plays in the spring where students could actually submit plays. And he was like, oh my God, I have to do this. And so he teaches himself playwriting over the course of the summer before his sophomore year, submits a play and it gets accepted. And there's this big dramatic moment where he's sitting there and paralyzed with fear. Is this going to be embarrassing and, go terribly? But then a character he invented walks out onto the stage and says their first line and the audience laughs. And in that warm, dark auditorium, he's hit with this even warmer feeling of like, oh man, I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. You have the sense of like, oh man, he never says it. He never says, oh, I'm going to be a Tony-winning playwright someday. You better admit me into your school. But you kind of get that sense. Like the kid spent his summer after his freshman year of high school teaching himself playwriting. Who does that? So think about, have you ever done anything that maybe not everybody's done? Did you start a club? Did you have leadership in some club or something you were involved in? Did you step up to protect a friend? Did you speak up? I've read a lot of really cool essays about like a new dress code came out at the school and it was kind of sexist because the boys could wear whatever they want, but the girls had all these limitations. And this girl bands a few of the girls together and they march into the principal's office and they're like, we think this is stupid. Like, we need to do something. And whether it succeeds or fails, it doesn't matter. The person already did the thing that they're like, damn, this person's going to go out and lead movements, start companies, make changes. And colleges absolutely love that stuff. So even if you tried and failed, you still tried. Think about that thing that you did, guys, that not everybody would have done. Now, that's not everybody's approach. Some people try that. They can't think of anything. That's fine. That's not the only approach you can try. Approach number 2 is to be different. Colleges don't just want butts and chairs. They want all types of students. They want diversity. Everybody knows that colleges like diversity, but I think what gets overshadowed sometimes by just the discussion of diversity is why diversity is good. Is it because we can get a nice representative photo for our school's brochure with lots of different skin color people on it? No, I mean, sure, that's like a surfacey way of showing diversity, but why diversity is actually cool is because it's great to have people with different worldviews all in the same place, teaching each other, sharing stuff with each other. I um, hadn't met a like a fundamental Muslim person until I went to college, and then I met like my dorm mate, and I was like, "Hi, I don't know very much about Islam except for from TV and movies, and I think those might be not fully accurate. Tell me about your life." And similarly, he'd never met some kid who had a lake cabin in Minnesota, and he was like, "What? Do you just go in the lake like whenever you want? What is it full of disease?" And I'm like, "Really not. Depends on the season." But like you're around people that share different life experiences with you. So writing about why you are from a certain place or you have a certain religion that not everybody has can be a great start. But remember, that's not enough because no matter what you are, no matter if you moved from Thailand or whether you speak Hindi or whether you're a one legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming, that doesn't inherently make you a better college student. If the college has a quota on one legged albino lumberjacks, fine, like maybe that'll help, but you have no control over that. And maybe there's three of them that applied this year and they only have one spot. So you have to imagine yourself, okay, I moved from a different state or I speak a language at home or something like that. Imagine you're in a pile of other people with that same thing. How is your essay standing out even amongst them? So for this approach, I would suggest starting with like, all right, well, what's a little different about me between me and my friends? If you have a religion or an ethnic or an identity that's different, cool, that's a good place to start. But don't just limit yourself to that. I'll give you an example of a student who wrote a first draft that was kind of meh on this topic because he just tried to coast by on. This kid had grown up in Moscow. This was before Putin ruined Russia's reputation. But this kid grew up in Moscow, and when he was 9 years old, his parents were like, "Hey, kid, pack your bags. We're moving to Redondo Beach." And so the first sentence of his essay was pretty good. He wrote, "As I stepped off the plane at LAX," sounds like a Miley Cyrus song, "and saw my first ever palm tree, I realized, I'm not in Moscow anymore." And that was good because, like, look, most people can't write that first sentence. However, the rest of his essay sort of languished in mediocrity. He basically just wrote like, "Yo, I moved here and I didn't really fit in. I had a accent and I didn't really want to be a weirdo, so I, worked on my English, got rid of my accent, stopped skating and learned how to surf and got rid of all my Russian clothes. And after a couple years, yay, I fit in and I have friends and I'm happy, yay." It's like, okay, but like, so what? The question that this essay approach sometimes has when it's not quite there yet is, yeah, but so what? Like, why do we have to have you at our college because of that? The reason that they have to have you at your college is not because of that place you moved from or that thing that you are. It's how that thing shaped your perspective, your outlook, either on the world or on yourself or on the thing that you're going to major in. So I asked this kid the same question. I said, there's other people who moved from Russia or wherever that are writing about this. How's your essay different from them? How's your experience different than other people? It's like, well, I mean, all that's true. Like I did work to fit in and I did, but let's see what else. Well, one day after I had done that, my grandma called who doesn't speak any English. I picked up the phone one Sunday afternoon and she's like, a million miles an hour in Russia. And suddenly I realized, oh crap, I can't understand what she's saying. This kid had tried so hard to like become American that he had totally ditched everything that was Russian about him. And he suddenly realized, wait, I don't want that. I don't want to totally like abandon who I was. So he wrote his essay about what assimilation means, how we think about assimilation as like you got to change yourself to fit in with where you are. And yeah, it's part of that. You can't just stay the same and expect the world to change around you, but it's also changing your environment a little bit to fit who you are. You have like a single drop of dye in an aquarium, you've slightly changed the hue of that place now. So he, started a Russian club at his school, and he started a brief Russian shoe style fashion trend at his high school. And most importantly, he made sure to spend a couple hours talking to his grandma every Sunday. And so now we get a sense of like, oh, okay, so sure, if I need more kids who moved from a different country, he checks that box. But also, this kid sounds wise. He sounds like he has knowledge about the world, or sometimes your experience might share more about what you want to do with your career or, about yourself or something. Now you seem like a thoughtful, intelligent person who I want on my school, who is going to share their experience with others and make them different too. Approach number 3, just be interesting. I mean, they got to read so many of these. Anything that you can do to make these a little more interesting and less just another essay about a kid who loves math because numbers are fun, or an engineer who built Legos. Gee, nobody's ever played with Legos before. I love Legos. I love engineers. I feel like those two things are natural, but don't think you're writing a unique essay when you talk about how your engineering as a background started with Legos. Um, Sometimes just going a totally different, weird way with it. These can be the viral essays, the girl who wrote her essay entirely about a stick of chapstick, or the kid who wrote their essay in Sharpie on the back of a Papa John's pizza lid and mailed it in. Or my favorite is the girl who wrote her essay in backwards handwriting. This is back when you could submit it actually by mail instead of just submitting everything online. But she wrote her essay in backwards handwriting, and then at the very end, it like straightened out into regular handwriting. And you had to read it with a mirror. She got into all these like Ivy League schools. The thing you forget sometimes, though, is that these aren't just gimmicks. They sound like gimmicks sometimes, but they have to be true to like who you are. What people forget is that what that girl wrote her backwards handwriting essay about was overcoming her struggle with dyslexia. Yeah, I can't do that one. Because a lot of copycats were like, I'm gonna do that, and then they didn't get in anywhere. And they're like, what the hell? And they're like, well, what did she write about? Oh, okay, it fits her. So you have to remember to keep true to yourself. By the way, another caveat to that is don't try something that isn't you. Sometimes I'll give you an example of like a funny essay in a minute here. And sometimes people hear that and they're like, "Oh, that essay was so funny. Should I write a funny essay?" And I'm always like, "Well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh dear Lord, please don't put us through that. If you have a sob story, but it's like your hamster died, like I hope that one's funny in some dark, weird way because they're not like letting you in for pity. They never let you in for pity, by the way. If your parent, this is very dark, but if your parents were murdered in front of you, they're not like, oh, we got to let this kid in. Why? This kid might be permanently damaged by a traumatic experience like that. You have to like explain why that makes you a good college student, or better yet, show them. So be careful with this one. I also will say the UCs like this one a little less. They don't want to see you just like writing fluffy essays that aren't really about anything substantial, and especially dodge their questions. They hate that. So, make sure you're still answering their question and everything, but there's no reason why your essay has to be like about a cliche overwritten topic. Why can't you write about something weird, write about something crazy, write about something happy or touching or exciting or dramatic or funny or whatever? I had a student who wrote about his uncle who played a huge role in his life. His uncle was like outdoors man extreme and taught him everything about the outdoors. And then his uncle has a stroke and is unable to really do much of anything. And this kid Jesse is like, well, no, I can't let this go down like that. I got to do something. So he helps his uncle get a big fat inflatable wheelchair to go out camping, or to go out on the beach. Even if he can't surf, he can be near the surf again. Helps get a handicap accessible van so his uncle can go camping one last time. And the story doesn't have a happy ending. The uncle dies, but even in his sad moments of mourning, you realize that his uncle had taught him one last important lesson, that he really liked helping people, and that's why he wanted to go into medicine. And so you get the sense of like, oh, Jesse's going to be like a good doctor someday. He's going to be doing it for his uncle. So in a way, it's kind of an impressive essay, but Jesse didn't really have anything on his resume that was like, oh, look at my hospital internship. Oh, look at my A plus, my 5 on the AP bio exam. He didn't have that. And so he went a different way. He took a really interesting, meaningful experience, and it's a sad essay, but it's still related to the content of why this kid's going to be a good college student. You don't have to be the best doctor from skill level because you're just a high school student. It could be that you're going to be driven to be one. And if you can tell me that story, that can be really good too. Perhaps the opposite of the Jesse's uncle story is a one I love telling. This kid wrote his entire essay just about the basement in their house. He was like, I know you're not supposed to write about a person who isn't you, but I'm going to write about a room. I'm like, okay, go on. So apparently the story goes that this kid, he had two brothers. They were all like really big, athletic, rough kids who just fought all the time and broke. They played tackle football like across the dining room table and broke everything in their parents' house. And their parents finally just moved. They're like, there's so many broken things, it's just easier to move. So they moved into a slightly bigger house. And on the first day there, they said, all right, you animals, listen, apparently we can't get you guys to stop fighting and breaking everything. So here's the rule with the new house. You get the basement. You could just have it. We're not going to put any furniture down there. We're not even going to go down. Like you just, that's your territory. You just do whatever you got to do down there. But if we ever catch you fighting in any other part of the house again, we're going to lock you in the trunk of the car for the weekend. Anyway, this basement very quickly became like a gladiator arena, like a Hunger Games fight club style, just mayhem. Like all the neighborhood kids could come over to know where they'd play these insane games of tackle football through walls and stuff. And it was this older brother writing this essay. His job was basically like senior game maker, and he would create these insane games. Like they had this one where they would block up all the windows with pillows so that it was pitch black and you couldn't see anything. And then everyone would run through the room swinging hockey sticks. And if you hit somebody, it makes a different sound than if you hit a wall. So everyone else knew where to then throw their hockey sticks like javelins. They had another game where the youngest brother's name was Alex. And the only rule of the game was blast Alex in the head and neck with pillows until he falls down. And the game was called blast Alex in the head and neck with pillows until he falls down. And Alex didn't particularly like this game, but everybody else thought it was a riot. So anyway, you're reading this essay and you're like, what the hell is wrong with this psychopath? But I don't want to hang out with them. And if they're like, if this guy's like laughing while he reads your essay and the other people are like, bro, I'm reading like a 15th Eagle Scout project essay. What are you reading? Can I read that? If they're passing your essay around, like that's a good sign. So that's yet another way that you can go. What's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? What's the funniest thing, saddest thing, craziest thing? What's something super quirky about you? Sometimes you don't even have any idea how it's going to be an essay at first. I had a kid once jokingly was like, the weirdest thing about me, I just freaking love blueberry muffins. Like I eat like at least 2 or 3 blueberry muffins every day. It's my favorite food. And I was like, okay, that's certainly interesting. They don't read a lot of blueberry muffin essays. You do have to like relate it to something. And he's like, what? Like how my love for blueberry muffins made me good at calculus? And I'm like, I know you're joking, but I would read that essay. Like anytime you can take one thing and connect it to something not related at all, you can even have your first sentence of the essay, how baseball taught me about capitalism, or how chia pets taught me about biology. It's like, oh, okay, like that's cool. So pick weird objects, weird little sense memories from your life and explore those. They don't always work. They don't always make a good essay, but write 10 of them down and something will work. That's, by the way, the combo idea. How a peacock taught me C++ was a good example of that. A kid was like during the pandemic just going for walks to avoid going insane. And there was this peacock that inhabited a park near his house and like tried to scare everybody away. And it was like a very threatening. Peacocks are kind of assholes. They're very mean. So anyway, he would like, why is this peacock doing this? So he like went home and Googled like peacock aggressive behavior, and he found out that it was like peacock mating system, and this peacock was sexually frustrated because there weren't any other peacocks in Torrance. So he then was like, wait a minute, if I can learn this much about that, I can learn this much about anything. I've always been interested in computer languages, but I don't know any. And that started him learning C++. He could have written an essay about like, I like doing C++ and I taught myself programming and it's fun. Cool. I mean, that's not even a bad idea either. That's like about the impressive programming skills and everything. But how a peacock taught me C++, geez, now it's more than one thing. So find ways to combine your ideas. Sometimes that's a good way to take 2 ideas that are kind of, this one's interesting, but I don't know where it goes. And this is like substantial about me, but it's not interesting at all. Is there a marriage there? Sometimes that's a great way to combine. Maybe you don't even have time to do that in a shorter UC essay, but maybe you write one UC essay about a peacock and another about a C++, and then your Common App comes together like that. Last thing I will say on a detailed level, guys, and this is more of a revision, but since we're in July, hopefully some of you, maybe started to draft these a little bit. If not, I'll have advice for you afterwards. But let's say you did write a draft, but you're like, it's not that great. My teacher read it and she said, I don't know, it's not that great, but I didn't really understand her notes. Here's one thing that people always do that's bad, and a thing that you can do instead. Smoke words is a term, and this isn't even my term. This was coined by one of these famous, college application essay writer people, bestsellers. But I really like this phrase because I think it expresses this idea really well. Smoke words are words like persistence, passion, achieving, goals, dedication, hard work, things like that. Words that kids think sound really impressive, but don't. These words don't mean anything. Anybody can say, I am passionate and persistent in working hard and achieving my goals. Well, what the hell did you do? I don't even believe you. You didn't even show me what you did. If in your first draft you have a lot of words like this, and you're like, oh, they're kind of generic now that I think about it. Yeah, I guess anybody could write this in their essay. And by the way, if your goal is to stand out, anything that you're like, well, I guess a lot of kids could do this or say this, then that is not helping you stand out. So if you find you have a lot of these smoke words, replace them with tangible details and examples that show you doing these things. You know, I talked about flying hockey sticks, and you all thought that was amusing at some level. But what the word that I didn't use in any of that is creativity. The creativity that this person put forth in coming up with all these zany ideas. Now, at the end, he did hit it a little bit more directly and talked about what creativity means. And it's not just painting paintings. It could be creating something where nothing was before, even if it's a room full of noisy boys bashing each other's heads in with pillows. You don't have to beat me over the head with creativity when you can beat me over the head with a pillow instead. Instead of persistence and passion about achieving your goal of making the lacrosse team, instead, every morning that summer, I got up at 7 a.m. and I fired balls off the red brick wall outside my house until my shins were bruised and the gutter was filled with balls. Oh, that sounds like hard work, but you didn't say hard work. Good, please don't. Show me hard work instead of saying hard work. So I've even seen this. Draft 1 has the word hard work in it and no example. Draft 2 has hard work and then an example. And then draft 3 just has the example and doesn't bother to say hard work. And now it's more interesting and you still have accomplished your goal. You've done it better. They don't believe you when you say hard work. Show them. Make them think that hardworking is their idea. Well, this kid sounds really creative. He never said the word creative, so how do I know? Like, show, don't tell. That's the second rule of it. Okay, where do we go from here, guys? If you are polishing your essays, abide by some of these rules. You're also welcome to send it along. I can look at it, or I can have one of my other essay readers take a peek and let you know if you're on track. We do one-on-one essay consulting. If you're just getting started in the process, start with this essay application brainstorm sheet. If you answer these questions, even if it's just like into your voice recorder for a few minutes, trying to answer these, you won't have a good answer for all of them. But if you answer the whole page here, you spend 30 seconds on each question, I promise you'll have at least a few ideas here. We also, if you're looking for help in this whole process, tomorrow our summer essay class begins. And there's some more information about that here, but it's a $5.95 class where we meet once or twice a week here and basically go start to finish on your 4 UC essays as well as your Common App essay. There's a bunch of meetings, but some of them are just like optional office hours on Zoom where you can get additional help and stuff if you need it. But if you start next week, you will be done with your UC essays and your Common App essay by the time you go back to school. And that's really nice to have a head start on that. There's also other options on here. Leading back into what Steph was talking about, we also have an upcoming College App workshop sequence. For any of you who go to El Segundo, you might have already signed up for the one we're doing on campus there. But if you don't, we have this one here where it's a 4-day series, but you don't have to do all the days. You can just sign up for workshop A. Oh yeah, I need help on my college list, but I don't need help on the essays. Or I do need help on the essays, but not the whole essay program, just this one-off thing. Or, ooh, I just want to fill out all my apps on August 3rd and have those done. That'd be cool. You can sign up for all of them or just one, and there's information about that in the packet as well. So those are some structured ways that we can help. Steph does a lot of one-on-one essay, app recommendation as coaching. I do that and the essay stuff. I have a gang of tutors on staff and so forth, but this is not supposed to be some big sales pitchy thing. These are just some other options that we can help you guys with if you want. But in the meantime, I hope we shoved you guys pretty good in the right direction already. Sorry, this is a long presentation. We have a lot to cover, but I do want to open this up now to questions for me or Steph. I didn't see if there's anything in the chat so far. Doesn't look like it. But does anybody have any questions about the essays, about the app process, about anything along the way? Yeah, question in the room. Sorry, say that one more time. Oh, so she's asking, what are the 10 ideas? Well, those would be as you start to think about either answering the questions here. What's the most notable thing I'm going to do in college? Oh, I'll probably start a Filipino culture club. Well, how do we know you'll do that? Well, because I started one junior year. Oh, that's an idea. I'm going to write about how I started a Filipino culture club at my school. Oh, I'm going to write about how I know that it's kind of cliche to write about sports, but soccer got me interested in chemistry. That's a weird story, but let me tell you about that. One girl wrote about being in a magic show, and that got her interested in chemistry. So, if you were thinking of anything that maybe the stories I was telling reminded you of, that could be an idea. If you are answering these questions later, if you already have a draft of something, any of those can be ideas. Ideas should be like a one sentence, how this taught me about that. Or I'm very interested in English because I used to try to read 50 books every summer. Or, I wrote a novel about an elf language, and that got me interested in linguistics. So, like, write about anything, even if you're not sure. I don't know. I'm the captain of the volleyball team. Hell, write it down. Maybe it connects to something interesting. Maybe it doesn't. You can always not use it. Does that answer the question? Perfect. Another question. Should my essay be more of a narrative style writing or an essay style? So it depends a little bit on you and also the college. For the UCs, you don't want to go too flowery and overblown on this because they are looking for an answer to the question. However, I'll give you an anecdote about this. The first year they rolled out the current format, this was about 10 years ago at this point, I went to, I think Miracosta hosted the head of admissions for UCLA, and he was like, we're sick of all this flowery creative writing language garbage. We just want you to answer the question. And so our new insight prompts are much more direct towards that. And then he came back the next year and he's like, okay, when I said just answer the question, I didn't mean just literally answer the question like, what's a subject that inspires you? I'm interested in math because I like numbers and I want to be a mathematician. Okay, you can do better than that. Like you can tell a little bit of a story, So there is a bit of narrative to it. Don't feel like you have to write a creative writing exercise unless that's how you write all the time. And even then, it can be a little bit dangerous for certain schools. So it's definitely not like a strict academic essay. It's sort of somewhere in between. I know that's a little bit of a vague advice. If you would like, you can email me and I'll send you a bunch of samples of like successful ones. And you'll find that some of them are a little bit more straightforward. Talk about an accomplishment. All right, well, our school didn't have this kind of program and I thought it should have one, so I did this. But this was a challenge, and so I did that. And this was a challenge, and so I did that. And now I learned something from the experience. Cool. That's not going to win any Pulitzers for being a fascinating story, but it's impressive, and you answered the question. On the other hand, some people will have extended metaphors in their essay because they're a theater person, and that's how they kind of write, and that can be okay too. Depends on what you're going for. I would say interesting essays tend to have more narrative creative styles. Impressive essays tend to be a little bit more straightforward. Different essays are sometimes somewhere in between, but it always depends.
I would also add, Paul,
Yeah.
that the reason I don't use the word essay and I use personal statements, which you clarified for me earlier, is because I don't want students to get locked into, I have to present a thesis statement, then I have to have 2 paragraphs that talk about supporting that, and then I have to have a conclusion that basically wraps up like a ultimate taco, the first part of my essay. And that's not, that doesn't have to be that way. And we don't really do a lot of teaching in secondary about personal narrative or first person. And this is what we are asking you to do. So you can be kind of somewhat creative with it. I had a really successful one that was 4 different vignettes that were kind of all tied together at the end, but they were distinct individual little sub stories in the Common App essay. And it was really successful. So you can get creative with that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you definitely don't have to write a formal academic essay. How narrative and creative can you be? You can go all the way, but you don't have to. Some kids are like intimidated because they don't feel like they're creative writers, they're engineers. That's okay. You can write a top 10 list of reasons that I love engineering. I guess that's probably a little overdone at this point, but if they're interesting reasons, then that would be a different approach. Or you can just tell me about the story of the time that you did this, and it doesn't have to be full of quotes and jokes. It can just be presenting what happened.
I had a kid that wrote, there's in a proof, like a applied
Good.
math person.
Another creative way to do it. And you hear the most about the really creative ones, but don't feel like you have to go all the way that direction if that's not your stuff. Totally fine to have a 3-paragraph essay, but don't feel like you also have to do a straight up thesis. Other questions? Okay, well, guys, we've had you here for almost an hour and a half now, so we will release you into the wild. Do take this packet, though. Use it to your advantage. Again, there's lots of information here about us if you need it. If you do want to join that essay class, obviously you got to get right on that because it starts tomorrow. But if you just need some help looking at your essays later, or the application classes that Steph is going to be teaching, those come a little bit later in the summer, later this month, and in August and September. You have more time for that. So use this as a resource. You can sign up for any of that stuff on our website. You can also just email me or Steph. I think her email is in here. If not, get it from me. If you have questions for her, otherwise shoot me an email. And guys, just always let us know what we can do to help you. Steph, anything to add to close here?
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're here for you guys. I know it's an intimidating process, but hey, if you're sitting here on a Saturday afternoon wondering about college, oh, you're going to college. Don't worry. Just a matter of opening as many doors and as many wallets as you can. Thank you, guys. I'll stick around if there are questions. But otherwise, thank you guys for being a part. Appreciate it. Thank
Bye.
you, guys. You're welcome. Thanks, Steph.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did you have any other questions or anything in person here?
All right, we good?
Yeah, you're good, Steph. I'm just talking to someone here in the room if you want to sign off.
Okay. All right, well,
Okay.
thanks. And I will I'll be in touch, and
We'll be in touch.
I'll see you the 27th, the 28th for sure.
Yes, I'm back in town now, and I'll be there to meet you in person on those first couple.
Oh, okay, great. Okay,
I think I will anyway. We'll touch base before.
Yeah, well, yeah, just get me logistics or whatever it is later. All right.
Perfect. Thanks,
Cool.
Steph. See ya.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.